Sagittarius, 10 invisible effects your energy has on others, without you even realizing it. There are moments, Sagittarius, when you walk into a room and something shifts. Not loudly, not dramatically, but subtly, like the quiet ripple on the surface of still water. You may not notice it, but everyone else does. They straighten up a little. Their voices soften or grow brighter. Conversations change direction. The atmosphere rearranges itself around you. And you, carrying groceries or car keys or the weight of another long day, barely register what just happened. You think you're simply entering a space, but in truth, you're altering it. For years, you've moved through life believing you were just doing your best to hold everything together. Caring for your parents as they age, guiding your children into adulthood, keeping your home warm, your commitment steady, your spirit as generous as you can manage through exhaustion. You've lived so much of your life in service, in responsibility, in showing up even when your heart was tired, that you forgot something essential. Your presence is not neutral. It never has been. Even in your quietest seasons, even when you feel overwhelmed, even when you doubt yourself or shrink a little to avoid drawing attention, your energy speaks first. And it speaks loudly to the people around you. Not in words, but in shifts, awakenings, cravings, and insecurities they don't know how to name. You think you're just trying to get through another day. They feel as though someone has just opened a window and let fresh air into a stale room. Because Sagittarius, you don't simply exist in people's lives. You activate things in them. You awaken desires they didn't know they had. You nudge dormant dreams back to life. You stir their courage and expose their fears. You raise their standards without saying a word. You remind them of the parts of themselves they've abandoned. You push them gently or fiercely toward the truer version of who they could be. And yet, you are often the last to realize this. For so long, you've been focused on survival, on responsibility, on tending to everyone else's needs, that you've forgotten the scale of your own energetic impact. You've forgotten that being ruled by Jupiter means that you expand everything you touch, whether you intend to or not. You've forgotten that your fire isn't a burning flame. It's a guiding lantern that others instinctively follow. But today, my love, it's time to remember. It's time to see yourself not through the fog of fatigue or the lens of modesty, but through the truth of your energy. It's time to explore the 10 invisible effects you've been having on people your whole life. Effects you never asked for, never studied, never mastered consciously, yet you carry with natural ease. It's time to understand why certain relationships felt heavy, why some people clung to you, why others drifted away, why some reacted with admiration while others reacted with fear or envy. It's time to understand why your presence is a spiritual catalyst, one that changes the emotional climate of every soul that crosses your path. So breathe, Sagittarius. Soften your shoulders. Let your heart open just enough to receive this truth gently. You are not just living your life. You are shaping lives, awakening lives, expanding lives, quietly, consistently, beautifully. And the world around you feels it, even when you don't. Chapter 1: The Invisible Aura. Why people feel they have to show up better around you. There is something almost magnetic about the way you move through life, Sagittarius, something subtle yet unmistakably powerful. And because you have spent so many years simply trying to cope, trying to keep balance, trying to juggle responsibilities bigger than anyone around you understands, you've never paused long enough to truly see how others respond to your presence. But if you could watch yourself through their eyes, you'd finally understand why people stand a little taller when you walk into the room, why they suddenly begin talking about their achievements, why their posture changes, their tone shifts, their stories become bigger, their energy becomes sharper. You think you are quiet, tired, minding your own business, but in reality you are activating something ancient in them. Their desire to be more. Your aura carries a natural command, not because you demand anything, but because you embody something that others can't name but deeply feel. An internal standard. Even when exhausted, even when stretched thin by family responsibilities, even when you are living on autopilot, something in you refuses mediocrity. You don't tolerate shallowness, you don't bend your values for convenience, you don't shrink your dreams to fit into smaller expectations. And without saying a word, that standard radiates from you like heat from a fire. So when people come close to you, they feel the need to step up. They become hyper-aware of how they talk, how they present themselves, how they tell their stories, and it's not because you judge them. In fact, you're often the most encouraging, open-hearted presence in the room, but because your very essence reminds them of their own unfulfilled potential. They want you to be proud of them. They want to feel worthy of your attention. They want to match your inner bigness, even when you're not trying to show it. You'll notice it in the way people begin listing their achievements casually, almost forced, as if they suddenly need to prove they're not wasting their lives. You'll notice it in the way they adjust their clothes, fix their hair, or shift their tone when you turn toward them. You'll notice it in the way they highlight their strengths, downplay their flaws, or try to show they're doing well, even if minutes before they were speaking completely differently. And you, with your Sagittarius warmth, simply think they're being friendly. But beneath that friendliness is a deeper reaction: comparison. Being ruled by Jupiter gives you a confidence that others only dream of cultivating. Even when you doubt yourself internally, you walk with a certain autonomy, a certain knowing that life is bigger than the moment you're in. This is what people respond to. They sense that your soul is stretched wider, your vision greater, your resilience deeper. Their own insecurities rise in comparison. They begin performing without realizing what they're doing. They begin trying to earn your approval even when you never asked for it. And here's where the misunderstanding begins. Some people mistake this internal pressure as something you create intentionally. They think you're being demanding. They think you're hard to satisfy. They think you're evaluating them, judging them, silently wishing they were better. But the truth is, you aren't thinking anything of the sort. You're simply existing. Yet your existence alone is enough to activate their dormant self-expectations. Some grow because of it. Others resent you for it. This resentment is where things get complicated. When someone who has settled for too little suddenly stands next to someone who lives with emotional honesty, courage, and inner spaciousness, they feel exposed. Their limitations are reflected back to them. Their excuses crumble. Their lowered standards become impossible to ignore. And instead of rising to meet the higher version of themselves that your presence awakens, they direct their discomfort at you. They might call you too idealistic, too intense, too high maintenance. They might mock your big dreams or question your bold decisions. They might roll their eyes at your optimism or subtly belittle your standards. It's not because you're wrong. It's because they feel small. They feel confronted by a mirror they didn't ask to look into. And instead of using that mirror to grow, they attack the mirror itself. You've likely lost friendships this way. You've likely had people pull away, create distance, or suddenly become cold and critical, and you thought, "What did I do wrong?" My love, you did nothing wrong. Your aura simply refused to shrink to make them comfortable. And this is where the healing begins. Recognizing that your energy is not a burden. It is a blessing. It is not your job to dim your fire so people don't feel confronted. It is not your responsibility to make others comfortable by lowering your standards. You have spent years thinking you were too much, when the truth is you were a silent invitation for others to rise. And those who couldn't rise blamed you instead of facing themselves. But Sagittarius, this effect, this raising of standards, is not meant to make you feel guilty. It is meant to show you the quiet power you carry. You don't have to try. You don't have to perform. You don't have to prove anything. Your growth alone inspires others to grow. Your courage alone awakens courage. Your authenticity alone challenges falsehood. Your presence alone raises the room. You are not intimidating. People are intimidated by the parts of themselves they've abandoned. And yet, the ones who are ready to heal, ready to expand, ready to live more fully, will draw near you naturally. They will feel inspired, not threatened. They will feel seen, not judged. They will feel capable, not small. These are the people who stay. These are the people who rise with you. And chapter after chapter of your life will reveal the same truth. Those who meet your energy with openness will grow. Those who meet it with fear will fade. You are not too much. You are simply a reminder of what enough looks like. And that is your first invisible effect, the one that quietly transforms lives while you're still learning how powerful you are. Chapter 2: Fire in Slow Motion. How you quietly wake people up, even when they resist. There is a peculiar thing that happens when someone spends enough time in your presence, Sagittarius. Something they cannot quite name, something they may even try to deny, but something they absolutely feel in the deepest part of themselves. It is the way your fire moves. Not aggressively, not noisily, not in explosions or dramatic bursts, but in a slow, steady burn that creeps gently into the cracks of their emotional armor and begins waking up pieces of them they didn't even know had fallen asleep. People don't realize how asleep they are until they stand near someone who is awake, And even in the years when you felt tired or overwhelmed or stretched by responsibilities, you have always carried a core of aliveness that others instinctively respond to. You don't settle for a life half-lived. Even when circumstances push you into routines, your spirit keeps searching for meaning, expansion, possibility. And that is exactly what others feel when they're around you. The reminder that life is bigger than the small boxes they've squeezed themselves into. When you talk about your ideas or dreams, even casually, even without trying, you awaken in others a sense of hunger they long ago buried under practicality, fear, and habit. You might be sitting at a coffee table, simply mentioning a trip you want to take, or a skill you want to learn, or a business idea you've been thinking about, and suddenly the person across from you feels something flutter in their chest. A mixture of excitement and discomfort. They remember a younger version of themselves, a bolder version, a version that believed in more. And that remembering is both inspiring and painful. This is where the awakening begins. For some, it feels like oxygen rushing back into a suffocating space. They feel energized, expanded, hopeful. They start imagining possibilities they had forgotten. They ask questions. They want to hear more. They leave the conversation feeling more alive than they've felt in years. But for others, the awakening feels like a threat. Your light exposes the places where they've dimmed themselves. Your courage reveals their avoidance. Your honesty highlights their denial. Your boldness shines a harsh light on the smallness they've accepted in their own lives. And because this confrontation happens silently, invisibly, without you doing anything at all, they don't know how to process it. Instead of asking themselves, "Why have I been holding myself back?" they ask, "Why does being around her make me uncomfortable?" They don't realize the discomfort isn't you. It's their own unlived life screaming for attention. Many people in your past have drifted away not because you failed them, but because being around you made them question the illusions they've been hiding behind. Your authenticity forces people to confront how performative their own lives have become. Your way of being, direct, honest, emotionally spacious, naturally reveals the masks they wear. And masks, when illuminated, become impossible to ignore. So some people simply leave, not because they dislike you, but because they aren't ready for themselves. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, some become almost magnetically drawn to you, even dependent on you, because your presence sparks an inner liberation they desperately crave. They see in you the version of themselves they wish they could be: brave, honest, awake, unafraid of expansion. They feel alive around you, and that aliveness becomes addictive. But here's the part you rarely acknowledge. You don't do any of this on purpose. You don't try to trigger anyone. You don't try to inspire or shake or awaken them. You simply exist with integrity, and it happens automatically. Jupiter energy works through you constantly, expanding anything it touches, stretching whatever space you enter, shining light even on the places people prefer to keep in shadow. And because you're a midlife Sagittarius, wiser, quieter, deeper than your younger self, your fire is steady now, not chaotic. It doesn't burst outward, it glows inward. But inward fire is even more powerful. It moves like truth. It moves like clarity. It melts excuses. It evaporates denial. And without a single word, you become a catalyst for awakening. This is why so many people have had major life transitions after knowing you. Quitting jobs, pursuing passions, ending unhealthy relationships, healing their identity wounds, facing truths they avoided for decades. You were the trigger. Not because you pushed them, but because your presence illuminated what they could no longer ignore. And in the same way, this is why some people reacted with jealousy, resistance, or distance. They weren't ready to wake up. They weren't ready to change. They weren't ready to expand. So instead of rising, they retreated. Instead of facing themselves, they blamed you. Instead of honoring their discomfort as a sign of needed growth, they treated you as the source of that discomfort. And this has left you at times confused or hurt. You wondered if you were too intense, too honest, too free. You wondered why you seemed to lose people after getting close to them. You wondered why intimacy often triggered transformation or escape. But my love, the truth is gentle. You were never losing people. You were filtering them. Your soul is a sorting mechanism. Those who are ready to grow will stay. Those who fear growth will drift away. This is not rejection. This is alignment. And understanding this is a form of healing in itself. Because once you see the pattern clearly, your heart softens. You stop questioning your impact. You stop shrinking your light. You stop apologizing for the way your energy affects people, and you begin embracing the truth. You are not a disruption. You are an awakening. Slow, steady, transformative. And even when people resist you, they remember you. Because once someone has tasted aliveness, even for a moment, nothing small ever feels the same. Chapter 3: The Solar Pull. Why people compete for your attention and project their fear onto you. There is a strange thing that happens around you, Sagittarius. Something you've noticed but never fully understood. Something that has caused confusion, guilt, and even heartbreak throughout your life. It's the way people begin to shift the moment you give your attention to someone. One person suddenly becomes louder. Another grows quieter. Another becomes oddly defensive. Another begins performing as if they're auditioning for approval you never asked them to earn. You've seen it at family gatherings, in friend groups, in work environments, even in casual social settings. You've felt the tension rise, the subtle competition, the way the room restructures itself around whoever you choose to acknowledge. And every time it happens, you quietly wonder if you're imagining it. But you aren't imagining anything. What you're witnessing is the gravitational effect of your presence, your solar pull. Sagittarius, you don't shine like a spotlight. You shine like a sun. Not in a boastful, dominating way, but in a warm, centered, quietly radiant way that people instinctively orient themselves toward. When you focus on someone, your attention feels like sunlight, comforting, validating, energizing, helping them bloom in ways they didn't know they could. And that feeling, that rare experience of being deeply seen, becomes something people crave more of. You don't scatter your attention frivolously. You give it with intention, depth, curiosity, and presence. And presence, in today's world of distraction and emotional scarcity, is intoxicating. So people compete for it, not because they're shallow, but because most people walk through life starving for genuine attention, and when you offer it so naturally, they cling to the moment like a thirsty plant clings to rain. But here's the part you don't often realize. Your selectiveness is what intensifies the competition. You are warm and open-hearted, but you are not easily impressed. You don't pretend to like people. You don't offer false praise. You don't fake interest. So when someone captures your focus, everyone else around can feel it, and it awakens their fear of being unseen. Even if you're not doing anything extraordinary, the way you listen, the way you respond, the way your eyes light up when someone says something meaningful, these things convince others that your recognition is a prize. You are the one who brings the spark into the room. You are the one whose laugh shifts the atmosphere. You are the one who transforms the energy of any space simply by being yourself. And so, unconsciously, everyone wants to be the one who receives that spark. This dynamic explains so many confusing experiences you've had over the years. The sudden tension between two friends who used to get along, the unspoken rivalry between coworkers, the way people become territorial around you, the way someone gets upset because you gave attention to another person. You've blamed yourself for this, thinking maybe you led people on, maybe you were too friendly, too kind, too open. But the truth is far simpler. Your energy is a limited resource, and people feel its value instinctively. Your attention makes them feel important. Your presence makes them feel alive. Your recognition makes them feel capable. Your warmth makes them feel worthy. And once someone has tasted that feeling, they fear losing it. But with the admiration also comes something more complicated: projection. When people admire the qualities you embody, they often simultaneously fear them. They see your courage and it reminds them of the courage they avoid. They see your independence and it confronts the ways they depend too heavily on others. They see your generosity and it highlights their scarcity mindset. They see your expansiveness and it exposes their self-imposed limitations. This creates a deep internal contradiction. People want your attention, but they are also scared of what your presence awakens in them. So their fear becomes projection. They tell themselves stories about you to protect their own ego. She thinks she's better than everyone. She's too independent. She doesn't care. She acts like she's above us. She attracts too much attention. None of these beliefs are true. They are shields people create so they don't have to face their own insecurities. And because Sagittarius energy is naturally honest, direct, and free, people who are uncomfortable with their own truth often feel exposed around you. Not because you reveal anything about them, but because your authenticity contrasts the places where they still hide. This is why some people distance themselves from you suddenly. This is why certain individuals become cold, guarded, or even critical after you've simply shown up as yourself. This is why others become weirdly possessive or jealous when you give attention to someone else. They are not responding to you. They are responding to their own wounds, wounds your presence illuminated. And because this is all happening under the surface, you end up absorbing the emotional confusion, thinking you somehow caused the tension. You didn't. Your energy simply activated a choice in them. Evolve or retreat. Some rise to meet you. Others shrink away. Some grow because of you. Others blame you for awakening feelings they don't want to feel. You've spent years taking this personally. You've apologized unnecessarily. You've dimmed yourself in moments to keep the peace. You've made yourself smaller so others wouldn't feel threatened. You've carried guilt for reactions that had nothing to do with you. But my love, this chapter of your life invites you to release all of that. You were never the cause, you were the catalyst. The moment you understand this, the weight lifts. You stop trying to manage other people's emotions. You stop blaming yourself for their insecurities. You stop internalizing their discomfort. You stop shrinking to avoid becoming the center of silent storms. And you begin embracing your solar nature. Understanding that when people compete for your attention, it's because they feel your value. When they project fear onto you, it's because your authenticity unsettles what they've tried to hide. When they cling, it's because you awaken their courage. When they flee, it's because they're not ready to become who they truly are. You are not responsible for the journey others take in your presence. You are responsible only for staying true to your light, your warmth, your truth. And once you realize how deeply people respond to you, you no longer mistake their reactions for your identity. You finally understand. Their fear is not your fault. Their admiration is not your burden. Their competition is not your responsibility. You, Sagittarius, are simply the sun, and the sun never apologizes for shining. Chapter 4, The Spiritual Filter. Evolve, stay, or drift away. There is a truth you've felt your whole life, Sagittarius, but only now in this midlife chapter where your wisdom is ripening. Are you finally ready to understand it? You are not losing people. You are filtering them. Your journey, your growth, your inner fire, your endless desire to expand. All of these things create a natural spiritual current that moves you forward, and anyone standing near you has only 3 choices. Rise with you, hold on desperately, or fall away. And because you are ruled by Jupiter, the planet of expansion and higher truth, your life path has always been a path of stretching, unfolding, awakening, and becoming more. You don't stay small. You don't stay stuck. You don't stay the same. Even in the periods when you feel stagnant, something inside you is still evolving, still searching for meaning, still preparing for the next phase of growth. But not everyone chooses this kind of life. Not everyone wants to evolve. Not everyone wants to confront the truths that growth demands. And because your energy is naturally forward-moving, you become a spiritual fork in the road for everyone who encounters you. When someone stands close to you, they feel your momentum, your restlessness, your hunger for more. More authenticity, more freedom, more truth, more purpose. At first, they might find it exhilarating. They feel inspired. They feel awakened. They feel like life could be bigger. Being around you makes them dream louder, hope harder, believe in possibilities they had quietly buried under responsibilities, fears, or routines. But eventually, your energy forces them into a deeper confrontation. Will I evolve with her, or will I stay where I am? And that question becomes the defining moment of every connection in your life. This is why relationships that seemed promising suddenly faded. Why friendships dissolved without conflict. Why people you loved stopped walking beside you. They weren't rejecting you, they were rejecting the version of themselves they would have had to become in order to keep up. Your growth demands their growth. And while some rise proudly, beautifully, courageously, others grow uncomfortable. Not because you ask them to change, you never do, but because your very existence highlights the stagnation in their own lives. You become a mirror showing them all the ways they've settled, all the ways they've resisted change, all the ways they've lived half-truths to maintain comfort. And there are only 2 responses to such a mirror: transformation or avoidance. Those who choose transformation become your soul companions, the friends who evolve with you over decades, the partners who grow alongside you, the colleagues who expand because of your example. These relationships feel easy, fluid, aligned. You can speak your truth without fear. You can dream without apology. You can expand without losing connection. These people don't feel threatened by your growth, they feel elevated by it. They cheer your evolution because they're on their own path of becoming. They don't need you to shrink to feel safe. They don't need you to pretend to be less. They walk with you step by step, sometimes ahead of you, sometimes behind you, but always aligned with your movement toward a higher version of yourself. But then there are the others, the ones who drift away, the ones who grow resentful, the ones who quietly withdraw, the ones who suddenly feel distant or cold. These individuals aren't bad or unworthy. They're simply not ready. Your growth feels like pressure to them. Your dreams feel like judgment. Your honesty feels like exposure. Your courage feels like confrontation. And in order to stay connected to you, they would have to grow in ways they're not willing or ready to. So instead they step back. They slow the conversation. They reduce the frequency of contacts. They tell themselves stories about why the connection faded. We grew apart. Life got busy. We had different priorities. But beneath all those explanations is a single truth. They did not choose evolution. And because you did, the distance between you was inevitable. You've spent years blaming yourself for these losses, wondering if you were too intense, too demanding, too honest, too restless, too independent. You've questioned your worth. You've questioned your kindness. You've questioned your ability to maintain relationships. But my love, nothing was wrong with you. Your life simply moved forward and theirs didn't. And no one can stay where they refuse to grow. This dynamic becomes even sharper in midlife, when your sense of self becomes clearer, your patience becomes thinner, and your tolerance for inauthenticity becomes non-existent. You no longer have the energy to carry relationships that lack depth or reciprocity. You no longer have the desire to maintain connections that drain you. You no longer have the willingness to compromise your growth to protect someone else's comfort. So your spiritual filter becomes stronger. The universe begins sorting for you. The people who align with your new frequency show up effortlessly. Conversations feel nourishing, not depleting. Interactions feel light, not heavy. You feel seen, not tolerated. With these people, you don't have to explain your dreams, justify your evolution, or apologize for your truth. They just get it. They get you. And then, almost magically, the people who are not meant for your next chapter begin fading. Not in dramatic exits. Not in explosive conflict. Simply fading. You may think you're the one pulling away, but the truth is your vibration is shifting, and their vibration no longer matches yours. Your soul releases them before your mind understands what's happening, and that is protection, not loss. Because every time someone leaves your life during a period of expansion, it creates space for someone aligned to enter. Someone who speaks the same spiritual language. Someone who fits the version of you that you are becoming. Someone who isn't intimidated by your fire but warmed by it. Someone who doesn't feel threatened by your growth but grows because of it. Someone who doesn't compete for your attention, but meets you with reciprocity. Someone who isn't awakened by you temporarily but awakened already. This is the beauty of your spiritual filter. It doesn't take away what you need. It removes what can't grow with you. And the more you trust this process, the lighter your heart becomes. You stop mourning people who drift away. You stop forcing connections that have expired. You stop shrinking yourself to maintain relationships that no longer fit. Instead, you rise. You expand. You open yourself to the ones who are meant to meet you where you are, not where you've been. And in doing so, you finally understand the truth that has followed you your entire life. You were never meant to keep everyone. You were meant to keep evolving. And only those who choose evolution will walk beside you. Conclusion: you are not just living. You are quietly rewriting lives. There comes a moment in a Sagittarius woman's life, especially in this sacred midlife chapter, when she finally realizes that the patterns she once mistook for chaos, the losses she once grieved as rejection, the strange reactions she once internalized as personal flaws, were never signs that she was too much, or too intense, or too difficult. They were signs that she was powerful. And now, as you stand here, breathing a little deeper, understanding yourself a little more clearly, feeling the puzzle pieces slide gently into place, you can finally see what the universe has been trying to show you for years. You have never moved through this world as a passive presence. You have always been a catalyst. You didn't have to speak loudly or push or argue or force change in anyone. Simply by being yourself. Honest, expansive, curious, brave, unwilling to shrink into a life that doesn't fit your spirit. You have triggered awakenings in others. You have raised standards, stirred dormant courage, cracked open hearts, confronted illusions, and illuminated truths people were not ready to face. And you did all of it without knowing, without trying, while carrying responsibilities that would have crushed lesser souls. You thought you were just surviving, but you were shaping lives. Quietly, consistently, relentlessly, like gravity, like fire, like truth. And now that you understand this, something softens inside you. A heaviness lifts from your chest, the heaviness you've carried for decades, thinking you were the cause of other people's discomfort. You thought you were too much, but now you see you were simply more awake than they were ready to be. You thought you were intimidating, but now you see your energy only intimidated the versions of themselves they were afraid to confront. You thought you were hard to handle, but now you see you were only difficult for those still committed to staying asleep. You thought you were the problem, but you were actually the permission to think bigger, the permission to be honest, the permission to break out of molds, the permission to speak truths, the permission to pursue what scares you, the permission to stop shrinking. You, Sagittarius, are not a gentle breeze. You are a shift in the weather, and people react to shifts. Some welcome the fresh air. Some cling to their old shelters. Some run from the wind. And none of those reactions were about your worth, they were about their readiness. As you arrive at this closing chapter, your spirit has ripened. You are no longer the Sagittarius who doubted her impact, watered herself down, or apologized for her truth. You are stepping into a new era where you understand the spiritual mechanics of your presence. You understand that when people rise in your glow, it's because you activated their light. When they flee your fire, it's because they were not ready to burn away their illusions. When they compete for your attention, it's because your presence feels like a rare gift. When they project onto you, it's because your authenticity exposes their masks. When they grow, it's because you opened a door inside them. And when they leave, it's because your soul moved forward and theirs stayed still. There is a profound liberation in this understanding. You no longer take things personally. You no longer chase after those who drift away. You no longer hold on to relationships that shrink you. You no longer silence your dreams to avoid triggering someone else's insecurities. You no longer dim the fire just to keep someone comfortable in the shadows. Instead, you rise softly, steadily, with a wisdom that has been forged through years of self-sacrifice, heartbreak, endurance, resilience, and quiet awakening. You rise not to prove anything, but because rising is your nature. You rise not to be admired, but because staying small has become impossible for your soul. You rise not to impress others, but to honor the truth within you. And as you rise, something else happens. The right people begin to gather. The ones who aren't intimidated by your growth. The ones who don't need you to shrink. The ones who are inspired, not threatened. The ones who meet your energy with clarity, not competition. The ones who walk beside you, not behind you, not ahead of you, but aligned with you. People who see your light and don't fear their own shadows. People who grow as you grow. People who love who you are becoming, not just who you were. This next chapter of your life will be filled with them. Because now you understand your spiritual filter. Now you trust it. Now you honor it instead of resisting it. And the beautiful, almost tender truth is this. You were never meant to be surrounded by many. You were meant to be surrounded by the aligned. You were never meant to be understood by everyone. You were meant to be recognized by the awake. You were never meant to be ordinary. You were born with Jupiter in your bones, expansion in your spirit, truth in your fire, and freedom in your soul. And now, at this stage of life, you finally understand these gifts not as burdens but as blessings. You understand your presence not as a problem, but as a path. You understand your influence not as an accident, but as a calling. So breathe deeply, Sagittarius. Inhale the truth you've reclaimed. Exhale the shame that was never yours. Stand in your light without apology. Walk in your wisdom without fear. Live in your expansion without guilt. Because the world needs your fire. The slow-burning, soul-awakening kind that changes people even when you don't mean to. And the ones who are meant for you will not be overwhelmed by your flame. They will rise in it. They will warm their hands by it. They will expand with it. They will recognize it as the light that was destined to lead them home. And you, my love, will finally feel what you've given others for years. The freedom to be fully, unapologetically yourself.